Okay. How's our council check? Do we have everyone?
I think we're good. Everyone that we're expecting to have.
Looks like it. Thank you, Mayor. Uh, Channel 8, we're ready for a countdown whenever you are.
All right, let's go ahead and start the countdown. Starting.
I call to order the virtual study session of the Lakewood City Council on June 1st at 7:02 p.m. To connect with the council meeting online, please use one of the following links at lakewoodspeaks.org or lakewood.org/council videos. For online public comments, you may post comments of any links to lakewoodspeaks.org. That's our online forum for public comments that will be left open tonight and through 10 a.m. tomorrow morning for any comments related to this evening's presentations. Will the clerk please start us off this evening with calling the roll?
Councilor Black is absent. Councilor Cruz, aye.
Present.
Cruz K.
Here.
Berman.
Here.
LeBure.
Here.
Councilor Lowe is absent. Councilor Nystrom.
Here.
Ryan.
Here.
Councilor Sinks is absent. Councilor Sherzai.
Here.
Mayor Strom.
Here.
Great. You have a quorum.
All right, thank you so much. And with that, I will very promptly hand it over to our city attorney's office to walk us through the reason why we are here to talking about this topic tonight and to set the stage as we move forward with questions and answer.
Thank you, Mayor.
Ms. McKinney-Brown.
Good evening. This evening's study session is focused on reviewing draft updates to two codes, Chapter 2.52, regarding initiative and referendum processes for local ordinances, and Chapter 2.54, regarding campaign and political finance in municipal elections. While all members of the City Council have been reviewing these proposed changes for some time, there are a couple of background details that I think should be mentioned before you begin reviewing tonight's codes. First, these draft revisions were the result of concerns raised by the last ad hoc committee to review Chapter 254 and public comments posted to Lakewood Speaks at that time. In 2024, Mayor Strom chaired an ad hoc committee of the City Council to review Chapter 2.54 for policy concerns. That ad hoc committee invited numerous citizen stakeholders to provide insights on Chapter 2.54 and listen carefully to all of their input. A couple of the stakeholders with strong backgrounds in local government elections pointed out that previous revisions to 254 had resulted in conflicts between some of the sections of that code, corrections that would take some time and consideration. Additionally, there were comments posted to Lakewood Speaks expressing concerns that the revisions that had been made to Chapter 254 over the previous years had resulted in conflicts between Chapters 252 and 254. Again, these concerns were noted. City staff agreed at that time to take on the project of reviewing both Chapters 252 and 254 for consistency between them and for consistency throughout the codes. With that understanding, the draft revisions being presented tonight are not intended to change any existing policy or standard, but are intended to align the existing policies between the codes and correct legal errors. There may be a desire in the future by the City Council to do additional policy revisions to these codes, and it is hoped that the revisions being offered tonight will create a cleaner slate so that when a policy revision is introduced for inclusion in one section, it will be more obvious which other sections are implicated by that change, and all of those matters can be addressed holistically. Second, Section 14.9 of the city's charter provides that the charter may only be amended in the manner provided by Article 20 of the Constitution and the state of Colorado, and any statute of the state of Colorado, and any statute enacted by the Colorado General Assembly pursuant thereto. Requests to amend the city's charter are analogous to requests to amend a constitution. Once they are adopted by the voters, they can only be changed or repealed by further action of the voters. Legislative actions, which are actions to adopt codes, are much more flexible. They can be changed by further action of the legislative body. All of this is brought to your attention only to clarify that Chapter 2.5 is only applicable to legislative initiatives, not to proposed amendments to the city's charter. With that introduction, I want to begin by introducing Gus Skank, the Senior Assistant Attorney, who has been working diligently with me to recognize the issues and concerns within these two codes and find appropriate resolutions. He will be presenting a brief overview of the draft revisions to Chapter 2.52 and be available to answer questions specific to those proposed revisions. Gus, take it away.
Thank you, Allison. Good evening, Mayor, members of the City Council. The intent of this presentation I'm going to give is to just give a brief overview of the modifications that we've proposed to Chapter 2.52 regarding initiatives and referendums and the procedures thereto. The presentation is supplemented by a lengthy PowerPoint on Lakewood Speaks that goes over the entirety of Chapter 2.52, discussing its current requirements and the proposed revisions thereto. So if you have any other questions, feel free to look at that. I didn't want to bore everybody with a 38 slide PowerPoint tonight, though. Before jumping into a section by section discussion of the revisions to Chapter 2.52, I want to discuss several proposed standardized changes made throughout the chapter that are intended to improve clarity and consistency, and like Allison indicated, not change anything substantive in the code. So the term city is now capitalized whenever it refers specifically to the city of Lakewood. And this aligns the chapter with our other municipal code provisions and avoids ambiguity. The term submission clause has been removed from any section that doesn't relate directly to the ballot title. And this helps ensure the terminology is used only where it has legal meaning, and to clarify that the petition form approved by the city clerk does not contain a submission clause. The term summary has been added to apply to all petitions rather than just initiative petitions. This makes it clear that the petition forms must include a summary of the ordinance that is the subject of the initiative or referendum, which is important for transparency and alignment with state law. In addition, section titles have been revised so it's immediately apparent whether the section addresses initiative matters, referendum matters, or referred measures, as 2.52 contains provisions relating to each of those three separate types of legal proceedings. This makes sure the structure of the chapter is easier to follow for residents, petitioners, and staff. All pronouns have been updated to be gender neutral to reflect modern drafting standards and to keep the code inclusive and clear. And finally, any references to individuals with disabilities or literacy limitations have been updated to use modern, respectful terminology that aligns with current best practices. So whenever I'm referring to a standardized change, I'm referring to one of those types of changes. And now I'm going to go through the code section by section, just discussing a high-level overview of what we're proposing for revision. The only change, as you can see, to 2.52.010 is a standardized update to capitalize the word city when referring specifically to the city of Lakewood. For 2.52.020, the proposed updates focus on aligning terminology with Chapter 2.54, improving clarity, and reducing confusion. We revised the definitions of ballot issue and ballot question for consistency, updated circulator for clearer understanding, and expanded the definition of petition section to allow stapled formats and to clarify that the city clerk must approve the petition forms prior to circulation. We also clarified that a summary is required for both initiative and referendum petitions, and updated the definition of title to distinguish between the pre-circulation title set by the city clerk for the petition forms and the ballot title set by city council after the petitions are deemed sufficient. These changes help ensure the terminology is consistent, clear, and aligned with all relevant law. We've also added a few definitions, including one for ballot title, which uses charter language to clarify when and how council sets the title after calling an election. We've also added a citizen-initiated petition as an umbrella term, so all elector-circulated petitions are treated consistently, and you'll see that definition also in Chapter 2.54 discussed later tonight. And finally, we added a definition for city clerk to avoid repeatedly saying "and designee" every time the chapter references the city clerk. These added definitions help streamline the code and make the terminology more consistent and easier to follow. Moving on to section 2.52.030, we made proposed grammatical and standardized updates for consistency. We also reiterated the requirement that the city clerk approve the initiative petition form before circulation. And finally, we established a clear timeline for appealing the clerk's designated title and summary. And these changes help ensure the process is consistent, orderly, and easier for petitioners to navigate. On to 2.52.040. The only proposed revision is a change to the section title to make clear that it applies to both initiatives and referendums. For the only proposed change to 2.52.050 is the removal of the phrase submission clause from subsection 2.52.050A. And this is consistent with terminology updates made throughout the chapter that removes submission clause from all sections not referencing the ballot title. The proposed revisions to 2.52.060 are minimal. They're mostly grammatical updates and a clarification that the clerk must approve the summary before circulation of the petitions. For section 070, the only proposed change is a standardized update to capitalize the word city when referring specifically to the city of Lakewood. For section 080, we made standard proposed grammatical and formatting updates, and several clarifications were added throughout, such as subsection A clarifies that the required warning doesn't have to be placed on the affidavits or within the body of the full text of the ordinance beyond the first page. Subsection B makes the same clarification for the placement of the title and summary, and the changes to both subsections A and B are in alignment with state law. Subsection D adds two requirements to the circulator's affidavit, now requiring the circulator to also affirm that they were at least 18 at the time of circulation and acknowledging that the circulator has read and understand the laws governing petition circulation. Again, both of these changes are in alignment with state law. And subsection E clarifies that petition representatives must accept all official notices related to the petition. And once again, this is taken from state law. On to section 090, we made more standardized proposed grammatical and formatting changes, and several organizational improvements as well. Subsection A now focuses solely on signature review after removing sufficiency-related language. Subsection C consolidates all the provisions related to the initial sufficiency determination. Subsection D brings all protest process requirements together and builds in state law protest hearing timeline requirements. It further adds a clarification that the City Council interprets the charter to allow for protests. And subsection E consolidates all final sufficiency determination provisions. So we just matched like with like throughout the body of this subsection. And these revisions help streamline the section and make the process clearer for everyone, which is important in light of numerous complaints we received from petitioners expressing frustration and confusion over this section. Moving on to section 100, there's nothing changed here. This section is reserved and there's no content in it. So skipping past that to section 110, many of the proposed changes here are grammatical and standardization updates. Subsection A is also updated to more clearly outline how an initiative is presented to City Council and the steps required to place a measure on the ballot. Subsection B adds a new paragraph that explains the ballot title and uses language taken directly from the charter and state law to ensure accuracy and consistency. For section 120, the only proposed revision is to the section's title, and this is done consistent with other changes throughout the chapter. Moving to section 130, The proposed revisions are minimal, limited to grammatical and standardization updates once again. For subsection 140, we've proposed standard grammatical and formatting updates, and we've also added several clarifications. Subsection A explains that the required warning needs to be on all pages of the petition except the affidavits, and only on the first page of the full text of the ordinance. Subsection B makes the same clarification for the title and summary, with both aligning with state law requirements. Subsection D adds 2 affidavit requirements. One, that the circulators affirm they were at least 18 at the time of circulation, and that they confirm they have read and understand petition circulation laws, again in compliance with state law. And subsection E clarifies that the petition representatives must accept all official notices related to the petition, also per state law. And if it sounds like I'm repeating myself there, I kind of am. This is the referendum section that mirrors section 080 for initiative petitions. So the chapter is really kind of set up, one half for initiatives, one half for referendums, and then a little bit for referred measures. So there is some that's going to sound similar. Moving to section 150, the proposed revisions include grammatical and formatting updates, along with modifications to streamline the code by removing sufficiency review content from subsection A, so it only focuses on signature review, and consolidating all initial sufficiency provisions into subsection C. Now subsection D contains all protest process provisions, with additional protest hearing timeline requirements from state law. And it now clarifies that the city clerk, for the city council, once again interprets the charter as permitting protests. And subsection E consolidates all final sufficiency determination provisions. Again, this is similar to a previous section for initiatives. And there was also significant confusion with this section during the referendum process last year, which with much of the confusion due to the way that the section is organized. And so while the red lines to this section really appear significant, the underlying procedures remain the same, but are explained in a clearer and more streamlined manner. For section 160, there's no content. That section is also reserved. No changes have been made. So we can move right along to section 170, where the proposed revisions include general grammatical and formatting updates. Subsection A is also clarified to explain that referendums are sent to the ballot by resolution. And subsection B adds a new paragraph explaining the ballot title requirements, again, using language taken directly from the city charter and state law. For section 180, the only proposed revisions are grammatical and formatting updates. So moving to 190, the proposed revisions add references to all other applicable local election laws, including the city's charter. And we've also included a specific reference to Article 11 of Title 31, which is the section of the state statutes governing initiative and referendums. Moving to section 200, the proposed revisions are primarily organizational and clarifying. They include grammatical and formatting updates. They move former subsection A content into subsection B. We've revised subsection A to remove the incorrect statement that the measures appear by title only, because they also are going to have a submission clause. And we add charter required ballot language that specifies that the vote needs to be for the ordinance or against the ordinance. Moving to section 210, the proposed revisions are simply limited to more grammatical and formatting updates. So for section 220 now, proposed revisions require compliance with chapter 2.54 of the Lakewood Municipal Code instead of the current language that references the Fair Campaign Practices Act. If this is for all campaign finance matters affecting initiatives and referendums. And then the updates also include grammatical and standardized changes. The revisions proposed for section 230 are limited only to grammatical and formatting updates once again. The revisions for subsection 240 are a little more substantial. They add grammatical and formatting updates, new publication requirements for referred ordinances, additional election-related procedural requirements, and a new prohibition on council readopting an ordinance within 6 months after voter rejection. And finally, subsection 250, there's no proposed revisions that have been made to that section, so it remains the same. And that's a pretty quick overview of what we've proposed. And I'm happy to take any questions to discuss this further as the body would like.
Mayor, you're muted.
Thank you. I have no hands up so far. I have one hand up, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. Thanks for this presentation and for staff for all the work that has gone into this. I don't have questions, but I do have like a couple of suggested amendments that I wanted to get a pulse from my colleagues on. And Mayor, I wasn't sure how you wanted to sort of approach that.
I would say go ahead and go for it. I mean, tonight we're here to talk about the staff things that have been identified over the next year, but there's nothing to say that we couldn't add other things into it. I think we just, as we move forward, want to be really deliberate as we've had in the past. We form a committee. There are things that might take a deeper dive before we do amendments, but I think it's perfectly reasonable to try to see what we can get started with without that process. So yeah, go for it.
Great. Yeah, I don't have changes to things that are proposed. Like I think you all have been following along and sort of tracking the pressure points and the process as it's unfolded over recent things. The things I'd like to talk about is sort of just expand on that. And so I'll just go in order. 2.52070. It talks about registered voters. And we all know that that is inclusive, but do we need to be more explicit in saying both active and inactive? Because I think we've seen some interpretations of that over the course of our history. And we want to just ensure that everyone's interpreting it as it's both those groups. So I guess I'd love to hear from legal, like, is it worth expanding on that?
Thank you for that point, Mayor Pro Tem. I know exactly what you're talking about, and I don't think that there was any confusion on the city's end when it came to the total number of registered voters. I read the language as requiring all registered voters, active and inactive. I think there was some confusion with the county, and we've certainly, Mr. Rob has certainly made very clear in his subsequent communications with the county that that's what we require is active and inactive. So while it may not be necessary, if the council desires additional clarity, that's certainly something that could be placed in there.
Great. So I'd love for others to sort of weigh in. A couple of others for me. And I know some had a chance to see Councilor Lowe. Unfortunately, couldn't join us tonight, but he sent some ideas over ahead of time. And I share in the sentiment in 2.52090. There is an enumeration of ways in which it gets verified. Address, more than one signature, but there's not like a signature verification. And I'd like to understand more. This looks different. I know that this looks different than other cities. We saw our friends and neighbors to the north in Wheat Ridge have a referendum process in which 40% of those petitions were nullified through a signature verification. And we had a really dissimilar process. And so I saw Councilor Lowe's remarks on that and would love to see if to understand why we wouldn't have a signature verification process involved to verify the signatures for which we're requiring them to have. So because it's all predicated on signatures, it feels like a missed opportunity to sort of verify them.
Mayor Pro Tem, was that something you were looking for me to speak to or for other councilor interests?
I guess other councilor interest, but is this, it feels like there's a uniqueness here. So I guess I'd love if staff has a perspective on that or maybe an answer to this. Like other communities are verifying. I believe the county does verify, and we have we've taken steps to verify other pieces of the petition, but not necessarily the signatures.
So just speaking to signature verification, as I understand it, the city is verifying the signatures. That's not necessarily including verifying against the signature on record in a confidential voter record. But if there was going to be additional changes there, that's going to be a policy determination. And so I would have to send that to Mr. Rob to speak to more in depth, as he's more knowledgeable on the entire signature verification process to begin with.
Right. Yeah. Thanks, Gus. And thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, for the question kind of through Councilor Lowe. The request from Councilor Lowe is, I guess, to adopt the signature verification process through the Secretary of State's office. And if he's specifically wanting access to SCORE, which is the Secretary of State's database, where municipalities are allowed to access SCORE when you're certifying, when you're the designated election official for an election. But we would not be allowed to have access to SCORE simply for petitions. And maybe that is what Councilor Lowe is getting at, but maybe it's all the other sections that you all want to bring over from the Secretary of State, similar to what you've seen in other cities, and add that to subsection 90 and 150 for initiatives and referendums.
Okay. So let me ask this a different way. If there's an appeal process and there is a body of individuals who've done some curing against the voter file and determined these need a second look, is there somewhere in this procedure and policy that could be explicit, that is part of the appeal process, where if there is someone else who maybe does that body of work, they've gotten access to the voter file, there's a way for you to verify what they're saying, would that then be part of the appeal process?
Are you saying currently or with the amendments suggested from staff?
I'm saying currently, is that something that we're accepting, or do we need to add it? Because I do think signature verification needs to go somewhere in here. And so I'm just trying to understand, is there a place that it happens already that I'm not understanding?
I don't think that it does. I mean, certainly those types of issues can be raised during a protest hearing. But I think the code is actually silent on those specifics.
So I hope to just hear others' perspective on that. And then, just to double down on that point, in section 2.30, it says that you can't duplicate sign, but you're not verifying it. So it feels like there's an ask to do something that there's really no teeth in that process. So just to sort of reinforce my point. And that's it for me, Mayor, in this round. Oh, you're on mute.
Thank you. Can you circle back to it? I think you had 2 points that you were looking for some other council sentiment on. One of them was the signature verification process for petitions, correct?
Correct. And then one was 0.070. Do we need to expand registered voters is meant to include active
active and non-active. Gotcha. Thank you. Councilor Furman and then Councilor Cruz.
I have a question and a comment on the first one, and then my comments on the second. The first question I have is what would be the reason for not including, is there a legitimate reason for not including all voters? Is it simply cost and the potential risk of ballots going to the wrong place, and the sort of basically at the end of the day it's cost? Is that the concern for not simply including all voters? What is the?
Yeah, thank you, Councilor Furman. I believe you're talking about the city mailing out ballots to active voters, registered active as opposed to registered inactive, and I mean, I guess the city could mail out ballots to both groups. It's another, it could be another couple thousands of ballots that are mailed out And those inactive voters have fallen into inactive status after 4 years or two general elections, having not voted. And then the county also sends a little postcard to a voter suspected of being inactive, kind of a check-in to say, we haven't seen you vote in a while. Do you still live at the address where we have you registered? So, the county records, they are pretty good, and they do a good job with the Secretary of State at keeping them updated, as opposed to people that are active in voting or have fallen into inactive status.
Okay, understood. I mean, I guess at the end of the day, I don't see a reason to not necessarily include everybody, but I don't feel strongly. It sounds like it's a small number, but I'm not opposed to that. On the issue of signature verification, I just have a question on this, and it's a clarification on what you were saying. Are you saying it? Well, let me ask you this way: is it possible to do the signature verification on ballot initiatives, or are you saying it's only possible to do the signature verification on the election itself?
Right. So the Secretary of State's office allows city clerks access to the SCORE database when they're checking voter signatures on candidate petitions and candidate ballots. Really, the history that I understand is that the database was used to, when you receive ballots from voters during a candidate election, those ballots, or any election really, the ballots are signed by the voter and screened by your election judges against the SCORE database. But we have to request, as the city, access to the SCORE database through the Secretary of State, and you are affirming and attesting that you are running an election and you are the designated election official. And so, if I emailed them tomorrow and said, hey, we're going to get a petition next week and I need access to the SCORE database, they would say, well, that's not how it works. You're not running an election, and you're not currently a designated election official. So if we went into that that level of detail for signature verification, it would cause an issue because it would be a requirement from our city council, but you would need to amend state statute to allow municipalities to have access to SCORE in other types of demonstrated need.
Is there a way that, because I heard Mayor Pro Tem talk about signature verification in Wheat Ridge, and I think I'd heard that somewhere else as well. But how is that being executed? Do you happen to know?
I don't.
Okay.
I'll have to touch base with Wheat Ridge and see, maybe what they have different language in their code or what they're able to accomplish. But that's my understanding of accessing the SCORE database through the Secretary of State's office only when you're a designated election official conducting an election.
I certainly see. It would be great if we could do it because I certainly see a value in it, but I'm just trying to understand how it gets done. Anyway, those are my questions. Thank you.
Councilor Cruz.
Thank you. Thanks all for the work on this. I had a couple of just clarifying questions and then want to speak to the Mayor Pro Tem's point, and then just have a couple of other things I wanted to bring up. So we'll see what I can get through in this round and then move on, and then I'll come back to it. So just a question I had just looking at some of the Lakewood Speaks comments. Is it correct that our charter stipulates that state laws regarding municipal elections govern our municipal elections unless the charter or our ordinances say otherwise?
Yes, our charter dictates that we follow the Colorado municipal election laws codified under CRS 3110.
Okay, great. I just wanted to clarify that because I think there is a little bit of confusion about that on Lakewood Speaks. And then the other thing I wanted to clarify was, I think in the beginning, I think Ms. Craney Brown, you talked about this section not pertaining to charter amendment elections. But I just wanted to clarify whether, like, what then would govern charter amendment elections, because I don't see the campaign finance and all those pieces in our charter. I think that is in this section. So I just wanted to better understand that.
Thank you, Counselor. That's a great question, and it's something that Mr. Robb and I are actually very familiar with right now as we're reviewing a proposed petition for a charter amendment. And it's governed by the Constitution, first of all, but then it's Section 2 of Title 31 of the Colorado Revised Statutes actually is designated as superseding the Constitution, and it provides all of the procedures that you need to analyze and review and process a potential charter amendment throughout that section of the statutes.
And does that also, that's super helpful, thank you. And does that also pertain to then like the campaign finance pieces too?
No. Campaign finance in Lakewood is regulated solely under Chapter 2.54 for local election matters.
Okay. So just to make sure I have it clear, if we, the procedure around verification, the conduct of the petition, the election, that is governed by state law and the Constitution, but then the campaign finance piece is governed by the ordinances we set.
Yes. And Mr. Robb has already confirmed with this particular potential petition group that they are subject to certain requirements in Chapter 2.54.
Okay, great. That's helpful. I appreciate that. I think to the Mayor Pro Tem's suggestions, I would support having that clarity. It seems like if I'm understood correctly, it sounds like it was the city's intention to in the count have the active and inactive voters, but maybe there was some misunderstanding with the county. So it seems like maybe that's just trying to codify and make clear current practice. Am I getting that right, Mayor Pro Tem / staff? Okay, great. So I would support that. And I think if we want to have a broader conversation around who we mail ballots to, totally open to that. I at least heard from some folks who at least thought they were active voters who didn't receive election or receive ballots in the special election. So I think would love to continue having that conversation. And then the signature verification piece, understanding that there's some nuances. I would love to make sure our practices are in line with our neighbors to the north or other folks who've had to deal with these sorts of initiatives recently. So I'd totally be open to that conversation too. Just to put that on the record. I think to raise another of Councillor Lowe's points that I also saw echoed on Lakewood Speaks. I think I also myself heard some suggestions of having for some of these like special election pieces, having some information like we see at the state level provided to voters. I understand that would be sort of a new process and that would obviously require more resources that we would have to consider when making this policy change. But I would love to understand what the scope of that could look like so that we can make that decision, because I know a lot of folks would appreciate that information and express a lot of confusion. So I guess I'm just putting that out there, and then also would love to hear if there's a sense at this point on like the scale of initiative that something like that would be.
Yeah, thank you, Counselor. I'll go ahead and take this question. What you're referring to is kind of the Blue Book request, but at the local level, which I'm sure you all remember, we did push out pros and cons statements for the debrucing question 2 years ago. And so we compiled a pro statement and con statements from the community because it was a Tabor issue, because it was a ballot issue / Tabor issue. But we don't, or we're not required to do that for ballot questions. And I think you're right that it would probably require additional resources, and just time from staff, and then, outlining that process in code. And as we're hosting more elections, especially special citywide elections, I think you're just seeing higher expectations from voters because they're used to seeing these types of resources, during November elections, whether it's the county Blue Book. We also receive requests for ballot tracking Because during the November elections, voters are used to receiving text updates about where your ballot is. We've received your ballot. Your ballot has been counted. We also receive requests for election results by precinct or ward, which requires different ballot styles to be created by your ballot printing company. So the Blue Book request kind of falls along the same lines as other big election services you might say that voters see during the county November elections.
Okay, yeah, that's
Mr.
super
Rob,
helpful.
Yeah.
I have a follow-up question on that. I had been told that there's also the expenditure on that. There's something about the expenditure on that actually is impacted by Tabor. So I think that is it possible for us to get a little bit more information? I don't know if we're even allowed to do that, because I understand that's part of what West Metro Fire deals with their elections and printing up some things. Could we get some answers for that, maybe, if that is a Tabor issue or not?
Certainly. And I think you might be referring to, referred measures from the body, from when council sends an item to the ballot. But I guess it could be, I guess it could be initiatives and referendums as well, and what the city is allowed to put out. But we can get those points clarified.
It would be nice to know, because that it would go a long way if that is something that we can do. That was feedback that probably all of us had heard, that what are these 4 questions and I don't understand, and not everybody's comfortable pulling up a computer. So it would be nice to know, if we can't do it, that way we have some understanding of the reason why we're not doing it, and can help community understand that as well, or be considerate of doing it for the future.
Certainly. Yeah, we can look into that.
I appreciate that. Councillor Icruz, do you still have your hand up, or do you have a new question?
I do, but I'm also happy to go to the back of the line if other folks want to ask anything else first.
I think you are the line, so you get to go again.
Woohoo! Great. Love it. I think just 2 other things that I wanted to raise, or 3 other things I wanted to raise, just kind of from Lakewood Speaks comments or comments that I got throughout sort of the process. One, I think that there was a question around some, in a city administered election, what are some of the protections around ballot boxes, kind of the governance of conduct in that capacity. I think that that's reflected on Lakewood Speak. So would just love to understand staff's understanding of, how close to ballot boxes people can be, or what conduct looks like there, what consequences might look like, kind of folks literature, et cetera, or if that's something we might need to clarify when we're not doing a county administered election.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. I believe you're referring to electioneering around a ballot box or a location with a ballot box.
Yeah, that, or voter intimidation, those types of activities.
Right. Well, we received some updates and complaints about electioneering near ballot boxes. Sometimes we had to, when we had the petition being circulated last summer, we had to remind folks to not be collecting signatures within 100 feet of a ballot box. As you know, we used the county's ballot boxes this April for the special election. I think we had 11 of them, but we probably could have done a better job at reminding folks to stay 100 feet back. I know that there was a ward meeting at a location where there was a ballot box, and people had signs in their car and they were parked within 100 feet of ballot boxes. So we heard all sorts of examples. But yeah, I hear you on that, and we'll have to do a better job next time at signage around our ballot boxes, letting people know to remain 100 feet back.
Okay, that's helpful. So if I'm understanding you correctly, the same laws and protections are in place for our city administered elections. It's just maybe a question of what reminders look like or what enforcement looks like that people can better understand in future elections. So we don't need to make any policy changes.
Right. Yeah. Electioneering within those locations, within 100 feet of a ballot box or a polling place, is not allowed locally and at the state level. So yeah.
Yeah, that's super helpful. Thank you. An additional thing I wanted to comment, just because we had some vocal constituents on this question. I think to the point of public comment counting as the city expending resources related to like our campaign finance laws. I just want to understand whether like my understanding is that something governed by our ordinance, correct? That's not like is that a charter or another like broader concern, or is it an ordinance piece?
Council member, that's out of 2.54.
Mhm.
2.54 does not allow city resources to be used for campaigning. So if individuals want to come forward during a city council meeting and make their statements or their views known on a campaign, they're using the city's resources to distribute that information throughout the electorate. Just like individuals are not allowed to use the public comment to make comments about elections, members of the city council are not allowed to sit and make comments on elections. When the city council is sitting as the city council, the information is being distributed through the city council's processes, and that is all paid for by the city. So that's all interpreted within the 2.54. That's not part of 2.52.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think I'll just raise you and it's at the wrong time, but I think I would be interested if other folks are interested in potentially just clarifying that like community public comment about an election doesn't qualify as using city resources. To me, I think it just creates like unnecessary friction between the mayor as the chair of the meeting and individuals in the community who are anyway. I just think we just saw a lot of examples where like that could have been a little bit smoother. So that's something I would put out there if there's other legislative interest in working on that. So that brings me to the end of my question. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. And I didn't respond, Mayor Pro Tem, to your appeal for additional information. I would also support the idea of clarifying the active and non-active and looking into what other practices are as far as signature verification on petitions. I'll give anybody else a few seconds if anyone wants to raise their hand and say out loud one way or the other on either of those topics before we move to 2.54. All right, we'll go ahead. Mr. Robb, will you please read 2.54 into the record?
Oh gosh. Yeah. Hang on one second. Sorry, Mayor. Revisions to item 4. Revisions to chapter 2.54 of the Lakewood Municipal Code.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to take it away with 2.54, and Gus is going to share his screen and show the code itself. Again, there were very detailed presentations put on Lakewood Speaks, and the purpose of these reviews or these revisions was not to get into policy questions, but it was to focus on the legal issues that have crept up over time. Historically, the city council has made changes.
Thanks, Gus.
Historically, the city council has made changes to 2.54 by having annual or every other year a semi-annual ad hoc committee that looks at policy matters. And historically, that committee has not been staffed. I mean, we just didn't have a legal department to staff the committees. So members of the city council worked together and made changes where they thought changes needed to be made. And what we've discovered over time is that many of those changes created conflicts between the sections of this code, between 2.54 and 2.52. And we also found errors just from the original drafters where they included sections from the Fair Campaign Practices Act, but they didn't change the wording from state law to local law. So what we did here was not look at policy issues, which I know that's where the city council's really focusing their questions tonight, and we're not really having responses because that's not where we were looking. We were looking at fixing the errors to create a clean platform for the city council to start from when they do begin to look at the policy questions that they've already been considering this evening. So having said that, in 2.54010, the minor change was just to add the state citation that allows the city to have its own local version of the Fair Campaign Practices Act. So we included that state citation. The major changes to 2.54 actually happen in 020, the definitions. And the ballot issue, a ballot issue, it needed to be clarified as to what exactly it was. A ballot issue is a Tabor referenced issue. And while we've had ballot issue and ballot question within the document as two separate items, once you got past the definitions, we were only seeing the term ballot issue or issue. So we've worked really hard to go back and clean that up and make sure that everyone understands ballot issue has a set of laws because it's Tabor related, and ballot question refers to all other issues that may be brought before the voters. Candidate was revised to clarify two words. I don't know exactly where this originated, but it was very clear with the last ad hoc committee that a candidate was supposed to meet one of two standards. But the way this wording came out, it wasn't one of two. It was both. So we just went back and clarified that when a person publicly announced their intention to seek election to public office, or when they've received a contribution or made an expenditure in support of their candidacy. So that was what was intended with the last revision, but it just, for some reason, wasn't written correctly. Candidate committee was revised to add language regarding when the establishment of the committee begins for clarification purposes. Citizen initiated petition. You've already seen this from 2.52. We were using the exact same language again to clarify, to make a standardization between the two codes, that all citizen initiated petitions, whether they are ballot issues or ballot measures, whether they're initiative petitions or referendum petitions or recall petitions, they're all citizen petitions and they all are held to the citizen petition standards. The definition was modified to remove the word regulations and just to insert the word code. Contribution was modified for clarity, but there's no intent to change the intent. And coordination, the definition was not revised, but I suggest deleting it from this code as it only appears in this definition and nowhere else in the code. Disclaimer is a new definition, and we needed a definition for that because it's used throughout the code, but that never defined. So we went back and found the definitions from state law. We weren't making them up on our own. We went back to state law. And the same thing with disclosure. It's used throughout the code, but not defined. Electioneering communication, that was a problem because it's currently written to be an and or. Notice I highlight the and between 1 and 2 says you have to meet subsection 1 and subsection 2 for electioneering, and yet subsection 1 only speaks about candidates, and subsection 2 spoke about candidates or issues. And so it's clear that the intent was that electioneering is supposed to cover both candidate actions and issue actions, but because it was left out of subsection 1, it was just confusing to people. So this is going back and making sure that subsection 1 and subsection 2 have been standardized to match each other. Issue committee was revised to introduce the concept that all participants actively working in support of or in opposition to a citizen-initiated petition must register as an issue committee upon the expenditure or contribution of $200. This is well before the petition is established as a ballot question or as a ballot issue even. So this again was a tripping point in one of the last initiative or referendum actions. And people were spending money and actively campaigning, but a title hadn't been established yet. So we wanted to make sure that it's very clear, once you're spending money to influence voters, or once you're doing something to influence voters, you got to be open and honest that that's what you're doing. Limited liability company was not defined, so we went back and explained what those state statutes were, what they were referencing. Non-public information, again, not revised, but I suggest deleting it from the code as it only appears in this definition and in the definition of coordination, which is another null definition and nowhere else in the code. Political organization was revised to remove phrases that were appropriate to state law but not applicable to local law. This is one more of those sections that was just picked up wholesale from state law and never revised to actually match up with local law. And referred measure is a new definition, making it clear that a referred measure is a measure that the city council refers to the voters. A referred measure and a referendum are not the same thing. A referendum goes through the petition process, a referred measure goes through the city council process. And there was a typo in small donor committee. Spending definition was revised to remove phrases that were appropriate to the state law, but again, not made applicable to local law. So we cleaned that up. Termination of any committee. This is a new definition. And again, it's an issue of how do we go about terminating committees? This was discussed in quite a bit of detail within the body of 2.54, but never clearly defined. So we picked up the language out of the body and brought it up and made it clear that this is what a termination of any committee requires. And unexpected contributions to non-campaign committees. Again, we went down into the body of 2.54, picked up that language and created a definition. So everybody understands right up front. This is a dense code, and people who want to run for as a candidate, or people who are wanting to put forward an issue of any kind of measure have to be able to read this on their own and understand it. And there's a lot of frustration because they have to dig through the body of the code to figure out what's even being discussed. So we were trying as hard as we could to make it as clear as possible to people who are not attorneys, what's actually being required. Moving on to 254030. Most of this is modified for clarity. It's fascinating to me as I read through this time after time that information just seemed to be thrown at the page and it didn't match up. And I think that my college English professors would have ripped their hair out. We all know you put one topic into a paragraph and then you go on to the next paragraph and put the second topic. So we went back and followed that very common rule. And again, the goal is make this easy for our citizens to understand. So that's subsection A, candidates and candidate committees. Issue committee, this is a substantive change, but it goes right back to the definition. We want people to understand that any citizen-initiated petition includes all forms of petitions initiated by citizens. There were no changes to subsection C. Subsection D, the title of it is all committees, but then it had sections that weren't about all committees. So we went through and made sure that disclosures were required and prohibited contributions. And we expanded subsection 1B to expand the duty to disclose from just a candidate committee to all committees. It seemed, again, weird that the title of the section is all committees, and then you get down in there and the provisions are just applicable to candidate committees. I think that the intent was all committees are supposed to follow the rules of subsection D. We corrected some typos in subsection E. And in subsection H, we didn't do anything. But at some point, the city council may determine that they want to set the contribution limits to place upon political committees. Right now, it's set by the Constitution, but remember, for local elections, as a home rule city, you can set what this amount is. So again, we didn't make changes, but we wanted to point out to you it's within your authority. 2.54040. Again, it's just somebody threw something at a page and we wanted to go back and clean it up. So as you look at the next few, look at this section, what you'll see is everything to do with filing schedules was pulled up into A1. Everything to do with duty to file reports was put under A2. Everything to do with reporting period was put under A3. Everything to do with reporting contents was put under A4, and reporting and reports filed electronically, all that information was moved to A5. So it's, again, the goal is make it understandable to people who are trying to figure it out. And I'm not going to go through this in too much detail because the whole point was to make it more clear, and I think it is very clear. Subsection A now has 5 sections, and they're all labeled, they're all titled. 050 duties of the city clerk, record keeping and enforcement. And this section was clarified for a couple of purposes. The first is the city clerk is not the enforcement officer or monitor of this code. And there's an attitude that was coming into the city clerk's office that the city clerk should be in his car driving up and down the streets, racing up to people's homes, asking to audit whatever's going on. That is not the role of the city clerk. The city clerk works out of the city clerk's office, and information that's required to be sent to the city clerk is reviewed by the city clerk, and any issues that the city clerk receives, the city clerk sends back to people who've provided that. But the city clerk is not an investigator and does not have an investigator on staff to go out every time someone suspects somebody else is doing something in violation. So how that might get dealt with, that's a policy question, but the city clerk is not the enforcement officer. That was built into other sections of this code already. That's not a new idea or new policy, but we wanted to build it into this one as well. There was confusion about who has to prove the wrongdoing at a hearing, and the burden of proof was clearly established. Honestly, that's the way it is, and it's always interpreted, but we wanted to put it in there because a lot of non-attorneys are filing these complaints. They have the right to represent their own point of view, and they need to understand what's being expected of them when they file these complaints. We wanted to make sure that a hearing officer's decision be in writing. They've always been in writing, but again, we just don't want to trip across that one in the future. Electioneering complaints has been revised to align with the revised definition of electioneering communications, section 2.54020. And again, the update was to add new disclaimer language to make clear the communication is not associated with any committee associated with the ballot question or ballot issue. And there were no changes to 2.54080. Couple of qualifications I want to make, and that is every time I read this code, I find a new typo. I need you to know that reading through red lines makes it difficult for eyes to see every typo. So for example, I've seen a couple numbers that need to have parentheses put around them. I've seen a couple places where we've missed the word city and it is not capitalized. Those will be corrected as we pull the redlining out. So we'll get those final things cleaned up. But we would ask that if you direct, this is the only policy ask that we're asking, but we want you to consider it. If the city council desires staff to bring an ordinance revising chapter 2.54 after the study session, staff could be directed to add a revision to the code similar to CRS 1-45-117, 1A1, which makes it unlawful for any agency, department, board, division, bureau, commission, or council of the state, or any political subdivision of the state, including special districts, to make any contribution to campaigns for candidates or to expend money from any source or to make any contributions to urge electors to vote in favor of or against any local ballot question, ballot issue, referred or recalled measure. And again, we would borrow the language exactly as it's currently stated in state law. We don't want to make up any new law that's too painful. So we would ask that you consider that one policy change. The other thing, again, going back, we want to make sure that everywhere the term ballot issue is used, that the term ballot question is also included. They're two distinct definitions. They've been used kind of as a single umbrella term, but they're not umbrella terms. So we think we've got ballot issue and ballot question linked everywhere throughout the code. But if we happen to have missed one, we want you to know we will make that correction again when the redlining is removed and it's read for its final cleanup. And having stated that, I stand ready for any questions anyone might want to ask.
Mayor Pro Tem.
I am pausing when others are delayed, so I only had a couple of questions on this. Thanks, Ms. McKinney Brown. In my time on council, this is now the third time I have revisited this, so I think your point is an important one. Like, this is sort of a living document, and there's always something to look at. I appreciate that staff's taken a lead on this because we have seen counselors before, and like, this is just not the expertise that we have. So it's helpful to get this sort of guidance from staff. Can you explain to me the difference between donation and contribution? Because you have a note in the red line that says this could be confusing. And I wonder if we know it's going to be confusing, is there not a way? And I couldn't quite get there in understanding what the difference was.
I spent a couple hours reading the contribution definition and trying to make sure that I understood what contribution meant. And I added some clarification because I just thought it was confusing. And then I thought, if we're talking about a contribution includes everything, then why is a donation not considered a contribution? And the honest truth is, I don't know. But by removing it, I would have been making a policy decision. And I was very careful not to do that. So again, everything that you're bringing up, I'm putting in a list of policy questions the city council might want to visit. And it's possible you might want to combine donation and contribution into a single term.
Great. And then 2.54050B, subsection 2B, page 19. Can you just help me understand the process with hearing officers? Like, we have a number of ways that we refer things to hearing officers, and there are times when expertise on that topic is necessary. I think campaign finance being an excellent example of that. This is so complicated. We had a lawyer just tell us the difference between donation and contribution isn't clear, which I think just helps exhibit how complicated this is. So is there a way in which, when we refer things to the hearing officer, that there is a requirement or a request or a pool of people that do have the expertise that we need to support this work?
We are already putting that into our RFP and have put that into our RFP every year for at least the last 3 years. But I need to be really clear. There aren't very many people who do this. It's not something that comes up on a regular basis. There are 2 people within the state who are recognized as the election standard go-to election people. We've used both of those people in our last 2 elections. I reached out to CML directly and I said, okay, give me the names of people who aren't the 2 standard ones. Who else is out there? And they gave me the names of the 2 hearing officers we're already using. So I've done everything I can do to reach out and see if there's anybody who is developing this body of law or basis of law. And I keep thinking that in my next life, maybe I should come back as an election law specialist, because it seems to be a niche area and one not very many people are in. We do ask that people have some background in election law. The other piece of this, though, is that, for example, the two election law specialists that CML really relies on, they have been lobbying for election law changes. They are very well versed in election law, but they're very well versed in state election law. And a lot of what we're doing, 2.54, it's local, and our law is not the same as state. And so one of the roles that Gus has been playing is he has to review everything everybody's doing out there and make sure they didn't miss a place where local law applied, not state law. So we're actually doing a lot of double work to make sure everybody's where they're supposed to be. Of course, we can't do that with hearing officers, but we can do it with our own attorneys. And that's one of the reasons why we made the suggestion that outside counsel only be required if there's a conflict of interest. It really struck us that we could have fought a couple of these fights a little bit harder. Number one, it matters more to us. We're invested in making sure our code is enforced. And we know these laws. I mean, we live them every day. So if there's not a conflict of interest, we would rather use our in-house attorneys. So that's a very long answer. We're doing the best we can. There just aren't enough people out there who have this expertise.
Great. Thanks for that answer. That's helpful to understand. And then just one more thing, Counselor Cruz, before I pass it on, is 2.54030H. You have a note about the level of contribution for political committees. I'm sorry if I missed this, but was there a suggestion, or is that like, Mayor, is that something we need to come to tonight, or just be prepared to talk to when we take action?
You don't have to do anything about that one way or the other.
Okay.
I'm wanting you to know that you can. You don't have to follow the amount that's set by the state, because it's a local election matter. This is the only place where the city of Lakewood has not used their own contribution level. And again, it may be because of this section that we keep the definition of contribution up above. But anyway, this is a policy decision that you all can look at when you're ready to. I'm just pointing it out. We did not have any suggestions for changes.
Okay. Thank you.
Counselor Cruz.
Thank you. Appreciate the Mayor Pro Tem for starting a conversation about the contribution limit question, because I had that as well. So with that being in there, if I was like finding the correct site for the contribution limits, like it seems like, what are the limits with like under this law? Because it just, to me, it like seems not analogous at all to some of the definitions that we have in our code.
Honestly, I can't chant those off the top of my head. I would have to pull them right up out of the Constitution and send them to you. And I'm happy to do that with the list of policy issues that you've raised.
Great. Yeah, because to me, it refers a lot to like state level candidates and state level terms. And so I just don't even know what the analogous terms for those would be. So that would be helpful, just because I think to me, like, I would probably prefer to just set those ourselves as a policy decision, so that it's clear to anybody who's interested in making a contribution, to the folks who are, who are enforcing this, to all of us. So to me, I'm fine to keep whatever the original intention of whoever put this in there was as like the upper limit. But to me, at least from my reading, like I could barely even figure out kind of what that was. So like 500, 450, like similar limits to what we have in our current code around candidate committees makes sense to me. But if there are other suggestions in there that I wasn't able to parse through, open to those too.
Okay.
And appreciate you flagging that for us too. The other question that I had for the suggested the potential language around kind of governmental entities involvement in our elections, I think that to me that would make sense. The one question I had was, I know sometimes like different levels of government express like more statement resolutions, like in support of or in opposition to what some of our partners are doing. Would us setting kind of these boundaries around expenditures and around interference in some of our local elections, would that also preclude folks from making sort of those statements? Or is there a way that we can kind of protect against kind of regulating the resolution-based support or opposition?
So the city's campaign finance law really follows the state plan, in that the state plan is that any governmental entity may do a single resolution of what they think. And the city council does a resolution. The planning commission does a resolution. Special districts can do a resolution. Every governmental entity is able to tell their voters, their contributors, their constituents, this is what we think and this is why. But then when they use their income to go out and actively campaign, the state law said, no, you may not use government funds. You may not use funds that were never intended for campaigning to campaign. But our code doesn't include that section. And so I think that historically, the thought was, if that ever occurred, that the Fair Campaign Practices Act would prohibit other governmental entities from taking an active role in campaigning in our local government issues or questions, ballot questions. But the Secretary of State made it clear this year that that is not true. That if it is a local election matter, then the home rule city has to set the rules for how other entities are going to participate in these elections. So it's a hole in our code. And we, again, although it's a policy issue, it created some problems for us. And we really need to make sure that everybody is playing from a level playing field, and that our Lakewood voters know exactly what money is being used to sway their votes.
That's very helpful. Thank you. And to me, I feel like it was sort of the intent of the charter, like the intent of how some of this has been set up. So to me, I think clarifying that and making sure that that's really clear, if that's something we need to do based on Secretary of State's office, I would be supportive of including that in here. So appreciate you all raising that. And I'm glad that that would still indicate that whatever special district or other entity wanted to express an opinion on the election could do so, but then would govern sort of the conduct from there. So I'm supportive of that. I would just want to say that I'm supportive of the combination or the elimination of the donation definition in the combination with the contribution definitions, especially if we put our own contribution limits in, and then can therefore kind of eliminate whatever specific language we need around that. And then I think, is there a reason we have to have ballot issues and questions defined differently?
Yes.
Okay.
It's because there are different rules for Tabor questions than there are for non-Tabor questions. There are not very many different rules, but there's a couple of differences. And just to make sure we don't trip over those, the State Fair Campaign Practices Act uses those two terms, ballot issue and ballot question, and our code has just followed that.
Okay, great. That's super helpful. Thanks. And then just as like another policy point, I'll circle back since I prematurely raised my concern around public comment by like individual citizens counting and using city resources. I would just also potentially advocate or be interested in, if other counselors are interested in amending this section, just to say that if people who are participating in public comment talk about the election, that doesn't count towards like the city expending resources. Because to me, I think that that would just ease some of the tensions and set what can be really tense special elections. So thanks all.
All right. Any other? Councilor Nystrom.
Yes, I just want to, Councilor Cruz articulated a lot of the questions that I had, so I do think we need to go back and revisit some of these things from a policy perspective. So, but I just want to say, Allison and Gus and whoever else worked on this, your level of detail and everything is phenomenal. And I would actually just want to poke needles in my eyes rather than do what you're doing, but thank you.
Okay, Ms. McKinney-Brown, you had asked for feedback on two specific things. So we'll go ahead and go through those right now. So the first one was trying to ascertain if council has an appetite to consider the policy change about local governments, and thumbs up if you want to entertain and have that discussion with first reading, or thumbs down if you don't. Okay, there's some direction there for you. And then separately, just in general, the whole thing, is everybody supportive of moving this forward to first reading? We have that scheduled in next month already. It's July. Yep, Councilor Ryan, you got your thumbs up. Yep. Any opposition to bringing it back? Looks like we've got consensus. So there you go, Ms. McKinney-Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. And I will send a list of the policy questions raised this evening out to the City Council so that you can all consider those in advance of this coming at first reading.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right, and with that, that is the last agenda item as far as the code goes. Do we have anybody that would like to share out committee reports this evening before we adjourn? Mayor Pro Tem, and then Councilor Cruz. You guys are busy tonight.
Thanks, Mayor. Just real quick, just from Dr. Cog, we at the last meeting this month in May passed the budget, $110 million, mostly federal grants, a lot of it around greenhouse gas emissions. And we also approved the economic development map. So this is a process that the region is doing around comprehensive economic development. We've been working with West Metro Chamber, some of our econ folks as well across the region, and really excited to sort of see how that starts to build as a movement. And then, of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't remind you all, June 24th, Bike to Work Day. It's a Dr. Cog sponsored event. So there are places all over Lakewood and the Front Range to visit on your bike. And so encouraging folks to register to do that.
Councilor Cruz.
Thank you. Happy to go after Mayor Pro Tem again. I wanted to just give everybody a couple of updates from two committees. So from the Legislative Committee front, just so everybody, if you're not already aware, the legislative session for this year has ended. We're still within the period where the governor can sign or choose to veto or choose to just let things pass into law. So we're still waiting on how some things shake out, and we should know more after June 12th, and we'll have our next legislative committee on June 18th at 8:30. If folks are interested, CML did also have a wrap-up sort of event that I believe people can view the recording of if you're interested in diving in more, or feel free to reach out to me to ask any questions. And then on the other front, just because we haven't had a study session in a while, just wanted to make sure everybody was aware that from the Budget and Audit Board perspective, kind of in alignment with our council goal around revenue and asking kind of questions around how we fund some of the things we're hearing from our constituents and from the community that people are interested in. A survey did go out that folks can check out at lakewoodtogether.org/city-services-survey. to kind of gauge people's interest in investments that we're making in and see how folks feel about the potential for a sales tax question on the ballot. And so you can see what that survey was, and we will also be getting an update on that at our joint study session on July 20th. So just wanted to make sure folks knew that that process happened. Thanks to all the folks on the Budget and Audit Board and to staff for putting a website about this together and for all the support in moving that process forward. So more to talk about soon, but just wanted to make sure people were aware of that process.
Thank you. Councilor Nystrom.
Thank you. From the Sustainability Advisory Committee, we are ready to move forward with the ordinance for the EPR, extended producer responsibility statute, and we're ready to put that forward to the council. And largely in thanks to Gus and Lauren and MJ and Katie McCain, they did a lot of work in the background that got us to this position. So I'm looking forward to that discussion. Thanks.
All right, and that is the last of our committee reports. So before we adjourn, I want to give a big thank you to our legal team for all the work that you guys put into bringing these two ordinances forward. Thank you so much for giving us the ability to go through those and clean that up and make things a little bit easier for everybody the next time we go down any of these routes. So just can't say thank you enough to your work team to continue to try to make it easier and clearer to operate within the city. With that, we'll go ahead. We have no further business tonight, so we'll go ahead and adjourn us at 8:27, and we'll be back in person live next Monday night for a regular business meeting. Good evening, everyone, and we'll see you soon.